Hey guys, how is everyone doing? Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. I know it's been a while since we had a show, since we had a conversation. So, today we're going to be having a wonderful conversation about climate change principally, and then about other things, right? So, this stream was sort of inspired by something I saw on Twitter. Twitter is always a mad place. You see crazy things every day. So this morning I saw a tweet by one female account that said, if you care about the environment, then you're gay. No, if you are a man and you care about the environment, then you're gay. And then it struck me. I was like, Now she meant that to be an insult, right? She meant that in an insulting way to say that men who care about the environment are weak men, they are gay men. And then it occurred to me, I was like, really, have people have people really gotten so contrarian to the point that caring about the environment is now seen as something that is bad? I know that this topic of climate change had been a very big topic a few years ago, probably is making a resurgence now, right? And um, I didn't really have a strong opinion per se about the climate change thing, but my natural proclivities was towards the quote unquote the denial, the climate change denial part, right? I was more skeptical of those who were the alarmist types, as Jordan Peterson would put it. I was more skeptical of those who believed that the whole earth is going to implode on itself if nothing is done, right? But today I'm sort of in limbo in the sense that I really don't know what to think. I really do not know what to make of the climate change arguments from either side, either from the side of those who are from the side of those who believe that we're in a climate emergency and something needs to be done, and from the side of those who believe that, oh, nothing needs to be done, right? So I just want to give my thoughts today, and I'm hoping, because I'm going to open up the stream later, I'm really, really hoping that someone from the stream can put me in the right direction, right? Because I haven't really studied climate change, the science behind it so much to have an informed opinion. But I think I have, in terms of the arguments themselves from both sides, I think based on what people are saying, I think I can give a useful critique of what both sides are saying. And that's what I'm going to try to do tonight. So, welcome to the stream. Hey, Steve. Hey, Christina. How you guys doing? So, but before we go into that conversation, the musings first, just one musing, right? I know many of you must have seen this Lauren Bobet thing that's going on, right? The US Congresswoman, the conservative Congresswoman who is sort of in trouble because of her behavior in a theater, right? I woke up this morning on Twitter and I saw all that outrage because it seems that in Twitter there's one outrage after another, one outrage after another. So once people are done with one sort of outrage, another comes in. Now the outrage is that this woman behaved somehow in a theater and she was kicked out, right? The earliest information that got to me was that she was kicked out for being inappropriate in a crowded theater. And I saw the video, I saw the short clip of the video where she and a male counterpart were mm, groping themselves. He was grabbing her breasts and doing all manner of things, and she was grabbing his crotch, right? I saw that. I was like, well, is this what people are really, up in arms about? I mean, these are two adults doing their thing. Well, that's their business, right? It isn't anybody's business, right? But then when I saw the larger context of what happened, when I saw that earlier she had been vaping and people around the theater were not comfortable with that, and the woman behind her even told her if she could stop, she didn't. And then she was behaving in a belligerent manner, right? She was acting like an entitled person, right? Disturbing the peace of other people. People were not comfortable with her behavior, and they told her about it. She wouldn't do anything about it. She wouldn't stop. So at the point, I think she had to be asked to leave. She and her partner had to be asked to leave, and then she tried to pull rank. She tried to play the "Do you know who I am? I'm going to call the mayor. I'm on the board of this and that." And that to me, just it's just such a shitty thing to do. People are outraged about the fact that she was grabbing someone's crotch in the theater. I think that's the least of the problem. I think most of the problem is in the other behavior that she was doing, vaping in public when she was asked to please don't do that, and then trying to pull rank when she was asked to leave. I think that's just sort of a despicable behavior. But like everything in the US, somehow it's always racialized and somehow it's also politicized, right? So, on the racial angle, someone also made a tweet on Twitter and pulled a video of a black female who had been trending on Twitter a few days ago, where she was basically performing some lewd, though she was dressed some lewd acts on a red carpet, I think the VMA red carpet, and then she was basically saying people are outraged about what's happening to Lauren, but nobody's outraged about what this black lady did. I was like, really? Almost everyone on Twitter for the past few days was shitting on this person for acting in that way. So I'm like, can't people just give their thoughts on something without bringing in the race element? Even it even got to the point of politics where some people are saying, oh, this outrage is because she is Republican. What about the other Democrat, a politician who was basically acting in porn movie and all that? I was like, really? It's not an either or thing. It can be the case that when you're condemning this does not mean you're endorsing the other one. Endorsing something does not mean you are condemning the other one. So it just seemed it seemed so childish, right? And then there was another account on Twitter that said, "What adults do, it's their business. That why are people up in arms about this?" And I was like, "Yeah, true. What they do in public, as they did, is their business. But be consistent, because this is the same person who has in other situations condemn the personal actions of other people. You can't cherry pick when you apply these so-called rules. If you believe that people are adults and people can do whatever the hell they want, and you don't want to criticize them for it, that's good and fine. But not in certain situations you get to choose and pick who you want to criticize. You get because they belong to quote and unquote your party. It's they're adults, they can do whatever they want. But when it belongs to the other party, you are up in arms, you want to critique it. So maintain some consistency. That's all I'm asking, right? So back to the climate change stuff, right? So Steve is saying the best argument for global ecological responsibility is this: it is far better to not shit in your own kitchen, not others. To hell with the science. It's just reasonable to be mindful of in our environment. And absolutely, I think Steve has made a very valid point, right? Which is why that tweet by that lady made no sense, right? Saying that someone who cares about the environment is weak and gay. I mean, common decency just tells you that you should care about your environment. Even if you are not a quote and unquote climate activist, that doesn't mean you cannot or you should not care about your environment. What kind of shitty person doesn't want to care about their environment, right? So Christina says, but Steve, that does not address or help global political aspects of all this. How can we help the globalists, the UN, WTO, UF, and all that, and global equity and save the earth at the same time? Well, I don't know. I don't know. But so I want to talk about, is the climate changing? Why is it changing? What are the factors most responsible for this change? What's the validity of the points being raised by the climate climate activists themselves. And what are the scientists saying? How should this problem be addressed? And what can be done? Basically, those are the things I really want to talk about, right? So in terms of whether the climate is changing, obviously the climate is changing, right? But it's a very open-ended term when you say climate is changing, right? The climate has been changing since forever. The climate 10 years ago, the climate 100,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago is not the same as it is today. So you've got to ask yourself, is that change problematic? I think that's where the question needs to come into it, is that this change, is it unnatural? Is it problematic? Is there something about this change that's different from the way the climate has been changing before, right? So for the climate activists, they take this as the climate is changing is a bad thing. The climate is changing, right? For the other side of the argument would say, well, the climate has been changing since forever. So I think if people can, come to terms to say and ask themselves, okay, if this climate is changing, what exactly does it mean, right? What is causing this climate change? What are the forces driving this climate change? So for the climate activists, they would say it's anthropomorphic, anthropogenic causes. That those are the major factors driving this climate change, which means man-made activities, right? The use of fossil fuels. The these are the biggest factors driving climate change, right? I know that in my lifetime, I have seen local changes in the weather, right? So uh, does that is that evidence that man-made activities are causing it? I don't know. I can't frankly say. But I do know that I've observed the weather patterns have changed in my country, in my local environment, in the local weather in my environment. So probably that's the way it's always been. Probably 50 years ago it was quite different from what it was while I was growing up. So all these are questions that come to my mind when it comes to say, okay, the climate is changing. Now, for the climate activists, they believe that the most offensive, or the most the factor that is most indicted in this climate change is CO2, right? So CO2 is the most indicted in this climate change. And because man-made activities are increasing the levels of CO2, therefore it's causing warming, global warming, and causing so many other problems that is being attributed to climate change today. Now, I know that a few years ago, while I was watching some videos on climate change, and from the other side, from the quote unquote deniers, one scientist was saying that it's water vapor that's the most important factor in determining global warming, and not even CO2. He was basically making the argument that CO2, the more CO2 you have in the environment, is actually causing a greening of the earth, that plants, because plants feed on CO2, converting CO2 using photosynthesis to carbohydrates. So his argument was that the earth was getting greener as a result of CO2. So, so which is more important? Is it CO2? Is it water vapor? Right. So if CO2 is the most important, and we have so much CO2 in the environment, on the one hand, is it good for the greening of the environment, as plants can now grow bigger and faster? On the other hand, if it's causing global warming, what should be done about the CO2? Right. So if we take away all the CO2 from the environment, or most of the CO2 from the environment, it's going to have a negative impact in crop production. So those are the things that come to my mind. So Christina is saying, I have two friends who are both millionaires who had FEMA rebuild their homes. They chose to purchase and live with sea and hurricane risks both twice, and both could well afford to pay their own way. So, Christina, you might have to clarify more for me. So, is it that these people know the risk of, they know the risk of living close to the sea, right? That the hurricanes and all that can happen, but they still chose to, right? I don't think this is an evidence against climate change, right? People can do all manner of crazy things, right? If they know, oh, you can't hear me. Uh, oh boy. Can you hear me? Have I been talking to myself? Oh boy. Can you hear me now? Can anyone hear me? Oh, Steve says he can hear me. Oh, oh, good. So Christina, maybe you try and go out and come in again, right? So I really don't know if someone is not trying, if someone is I hear these arguments all the time that if climate change is so real, then why are politicians buying beachfront properties? And I don't know. They might have their own reasons for buying beachfront properties, but that is not an argument. That's not a scientific argument against climate change, right? You people make all manner of very weird decisions. So I don't think it can be based on that. So we have to ask ourselves, what is really causing this climate change, right? Now, in terms of this, there's this scientific consensus that says 97% of scientists agree or believe that the climate is changing. Well, I read somewhere that that consensus itself was kind of misleading because those scientists were asked the question, do you think the climate is changing? And of course they said yes, of course the climate is changing, but that's not an indication of anything, right? So I think a proper question would have been, do you think that the climate is changing in a manner or in a way which is deleterious to the environment, in a way which is deleterious to human beings, right? So on one hand, I think that there's a part of me that wants to say, well, even if the climate is changing, right? Human beings have weathered worse environments before in their history. We've been here for, you know, uh, if you want to go biblically for about 6,000 years, if you want to go scientifically for much more longer than that, right? And we've been through a lot of human beings have been through a lot of challenges, right? But somehow we just managed to survive. So are you really going to tell me that somehow a warmer climate is what's going to wipe out humanity? But that's one part of the argument. Now, the other part of the argument is that, right, for those who don't see a need to do anything, right? For example, they will tell you that, oh, there are more forests now in Europe than in the 19th century. So that's proof that there is no problem. But that's getting it wrong actually, because the reason why there are more forests in Europe right now is because of conservation efforts, because people deliberately decided to say we need to conserve this forest. There were actions, and I'm sure there might have been people then who did not see a need for conserving forests, right? So imagine if everybody had listened to such people and said, oh, there's no need, there's no problem, let's do whatever we want to do. Same also with conservation efforts going on in the oceans, right? Trying to make sure that we don't overfish the oceans, right? If those things are not put in place, we probably will be running into some problems right now. So so that's why I thought the comments that that lady made on Twitter, that if you care about the environment, that it's weak, it's gay, I think it doesn't make any sense, because from what we have seen, the efforts that past generations made in trying to preserve the environment has actually paid off, or is paying off right now. We are actually benefiting from it. So do we not have to do anything at all? Is it like, oh, we shouldn't do anything at all? No, there are the types like the Jordan Petersons who don't believe that anything should be done. Now, my problem with Jordan Peterson on the climate issue is that he mostly is attacking the climate activists rather than the climate scientists, or rather than what the science is saying. He seems to have a problem with activists, and I can understand that they can be loud, they can be obnoxious, they can be in your face, right? So it's possible that the activists themselves can be a turnoff, but that does not in any way mean that there is not a problem. That does not mean that what they're saying is totally wrong. They might not be the best in carrying out that message of saying, you know what, there's a problem that needs to be fixed. They might be hyperbolic, they might be disruptive, and we see what they do, which, I really don't agree with. But I think he should ask the scientists. They should look at the scientific literature to see whether there really is a problem rather than reacting to activists, because you're going to get it wrong if you're just reacting to activists who are calling for change. You're going to get it wrong, because activists are not scientists. They might not be in the best position to explain what the hell is wrong with the environment. So Stanley, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing? So Steve says 37 billion tons of CO2 is produced each year. There are 3 trillion trees. Each tree can process 48 pounds of CO2 each year. Excess CO2 mathematically cannot exist. Hmm, that's an interesting point. So, Steve, you're saying that excess CO2 cannot mathematically exist. So, are you saying that by this calculation, we don't have a problem? We don't have to do anything about quote and unquote the warming of the environment, of climate change, and all that. Well, if that's a point that can be proved, I'd love to hear it. Right, I'm going to open up the stream soon, but shout out to Mark. Mark sent me he sent me something that I need to go through. Maybe I'll just share my screen on it, which I thought was very very So let me just share my screen. So it's top findings from the IPCC on climate. Just let me know if you can see my screen. If you can't see my screen, but I think you can see it. Yeah. So let me go there. So 10 big findings from the 2023 IPCC report on climate change, right? So I'll just skip um, to s- here, which says the evidence of global warming is already underway. So these are some of the quote unquote evidences that the concentrations of carbon dioxide is unmatched for at least 2 million years. Well, I don't know how, probably they have a way of calculating these things, how it was in the past, right? But I don't know how reliable such calculations are, right? So if we're comparing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to the last 2 million years, I don't know, right? So said another evidence is that glacial retreat unmatched for 2,000 plus years. Last decade warmer than any period for 125,000 years. Sea level rising faster than any prior century for 3,000 years. Summer Arctic ice coverage smaller than any time in last 1,000 years. Ocean warming faster than at any time since the end of the last ice age. Ocean acidification at highest level of last 26,000 years. I don't know the reliability of, you know, comparing today and 2,000 years ago, 2 million years ago. I don't know how accurate these scientific tools are in terms of managing or making such calculations, right? So he said that climate impact on people and ecosystems are widespread and severe than expected, and future risks will escalate rapidly with every fraction of a degree of warming, right? So these are some of the risks, the comparing the risk from temperature rising. So there's risk of biodiversity loss. So for a 1.5 degree increase in temperature than it is currently, there's a 14% we're going to be losing 14% of biodiversity. For 2 degrees, we're losing 18%, while 3 degrees, we're losing 29%. Drought, so dry land population exposed to water stress, about zero point 0.9, almost 1 billion people are going to be affected by droughts if there's a 1.5% increase, another 1.15, and close to 1.29 billion if there's a 3 degree increase. Food security to be affecting 63 no, to the tune of $63 billion for 1.5 degree rise, up to $128 billion. Fires, this will be increase in fires, extreme heats, and all that fun stuff, right? Floods, sea level rise, coral reefs being decimated. Well, in my country, I mean, this past few years, there've been some issues of floods, and even this year, there's been warning from the authorities that they're going to be flooding. Could that be due to climate change? Well, probably, but it's more an infrastructural problem because from what I was able to understand, is that there's a dam from Cameroon, which is a neighboring country to us, the northeast of our country, to the northeast of our country, that w- they have a dam that they usually let open some years, and Nigeria doesn't have a dam to hold that water when Cameroon opens up their dam. So it just ends up causing flooding in Nigeria. So that could possibly be an infrastructural problem rather than it being an evidence for uh, global warming and all that. So adaptation measures can effectively build resilience, but more finance is needed to scale solutions. So this is where I was talking about, humans are very adaptable, and we can always adapt to any situation. But they're saying that yes, adaptation measures can be good, but there's funding. There needs to be funding for people to be able to adapt properly, right? So some sort of ecosystem based adaptation that can protect lives and livelihoods are shown here. But I think where I really want to concentrate on, yeah, so this place says that the IPCC finds that there is more than 50% chance that global temperature rise will reach or surpass 1.5 degrees between 2021 and 2040. Oh, no. So there was one place that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about the solutions that are being proposed, right? Some of the solutions that are being proposed, 10 key solutions that needed to mitigate climate change. What do you guys think about these solutions? How crazy do you think they are, right? So one is to retire coal plants, which, so that's in many parts of the world, this has already been done. Another is to invest in clean energy like solar and wind. Some people have reservations about wind and all that. But if the costs comes down, do you think it's preferable to a fossil fuel based, energy source? Another is to retrofit and decarbonize buildings. I don't know how this will work, but it's there. Decarbonize cement, steel, and plastics. Shift to electric vehicles. Now, I have big issues with this shift to electric vehicles because from the little I've been able to, you know, uh, try to research on, electric vehicles come with a whole host of other problems as well. I mean, in terms of the batteries, in terms of getting them, mining the materials for the batteries, even disposing the batteries itself, it seems to be very, very just as terrible for the environment, right? So I don't know about that. Increase public transportation, biking and walking. I think this can be an effective solution if cities are planned better, where people don't have to commute to very far destinations. Maybe people can walk to work, or people can, have public transportation system where everyone doesn't have to drive. That's a good one. Decarbonize aviation and shipping. Well, halt deforestation and restore graded lands. This is good. I think that's very, very good. Reduce food loss and improve agricultural practices. These are reasonable propositions. Eat more plants and less meat. Well, these are, in my opinion, are reasonable propositions, right? So, for those who don't think that, for those who don't think that there's a problem, or those who think that the so-called climate activists are crazy, right? What do you think about those proposals that I just showed? What do you think about the proposals? Do you think they are wild? Do you think that they are as radical as they are being made out to be? They don't seem so radical to me, though. They just seem like, they seem like things that we can get done, right? So let me stop sharing my screen. So let me see. Let me see. Let me see some of the charts, and then I'll open up the stream. So Stanley says, Steve, most of the carbon is in the ice, in the ice, in the ice caps which is melting. Ice caps which is melting. Math must include more than trees. Your number, as Virginia says, that your number that trees process 48 pounds of CO2 is actually a variable. A spruce or tree line processes much less CO2. Hmm. Stanley says, now how much carbon is necessary to sustain 9 billion humans plus animals? Because we are not the only living animals that need air. Please remember that breathing includes carbon exchange. Hmm. And veggies need carbon for the vegetarians. Hmm. And to produce diamond and drill bits, carbon steel, and future petrol for future helies. Well, so I think this is time for me to open up the stream. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. What do you think about this climate change debate? Do you think that there's no problem, that we should just go on as usual? Do you think there's a problem? If you think that there's a problem, what do you think can be done to fix this problem? What can we do actually? So I'm expecting Steve and Stanley, anyone, Christina, Virginia, anyone to call in. Let's have a talk. Let's have a conversation. And I'm hoping that Marion from Twitter is here too. I know Marion is a big proponent of, oh, there's a problem. There's a problem. Yeah. So Steve, hey Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm good, 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 good. So good to see you. So
Yeah,
tell me.
sorry, I just got done mowing the lawn, dude, so I'm gonna be kind of like sweaty and gross, but
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
yeah. So the math was kind of a kind of tongue in cheek approach slash joke to the conversation,
Mm,
um, because obviously you can't solve a complex problem with simple math. That's just fucking ridiculous.
mm,
But it does bring a little bit, like any comedy, it brings a little bit of truth to the conversation, which is yes, yes, and yes, and to all of those other things. Um, and I'm actually for ecological responsibility. So in the Salt Lake City Valley, we live in a valley, so we have a really bad yearly inversion when it gets cold. So when it starts
mm,
to snow, you can actually see the layers of smog building up and building up, and we have a lot of respiratory problems in our area because of it. So obviously, there's a responsibility to lower that, to lower the smog, the CO2 levels, whatever. Just because we might not have a problem doesn't mean that we won't have a problem in the future if we're not
mhm,
mindful of what we do today will definitely affect tomorrow.
yeah.
And you can see no better evidence of this in LA when they started to enact like stricter emissions control laws, and the smog was so bad there, it was horrible. And now they're actually doing really well. You can actually see the ocean from most places up in the mountains,
Mm,
which you couldn't do before. It was just a glaze of brown and gray. So it's obvious that we have an effect on our environment.
mm.
Not to mention, if you look during the pandemic, um, the canals of Venice actually cleaned up.
Wow.
Dolphins returned to Venice and the surrounding areas. It's like that has not happened, and nobody even knows how long it's been since that hasn't happened. So it's obvious that the Earth can actually self correct rather quickly.
Mm,
Um, so if we're doing what our responsibility is to be responsible for our environment, then we should be able to move forward with technological advances that help us even do that even further. Like if we put solar on every single house, we'd probably completely just shut down power grids entirely. And we wouldn't even need fossil fuels. We wouldn't need nuclear power and such like that.
mm,
This is one thing that Elon Musk definitely has right. Is solar energy is definitely the cleanest possible and the cheapest possible energy that we can produce. And electric cars are definitely not the way to go.
mm.
The amount of particulate matter that is put into the atmosphere just by because you have to dig up, I think it was like 500 metric tons to get just enough cobalt for one battery. That's
Wow.
ridiculous. So there's a whole lot of diesel fuel going into the atmosphere, exhaust fumes. You've got the tankers that drive the chemicals back and forth, because I think it was like a battery passes all the stuff that is required to make a battery passes the Pacific Ocean like 3 times before it actually becomes a battery and goes into a
Wow.
car. Like that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? So while we do need to have some kind of sustainable and ecologically responsible form of commuting, electric cars right now are just not the answer. Not until we have better battery technology. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Mm. Oh, that's a fantastic summary. I think you have a clearer thought on this than myself. Because I ask myself, right, what but what do you think about those who believe that there is no problem, that this is just alarmism, that we're just screaming too much, that the climate activists are just screaming too much. You hear this argument that, or if there's really a problem, why are politicians buying beachfront properties, right? You hear such arguments all the time. So what do you think about that?
I think that's kind of a silly argument because it kind of diffuses the point of the argument in itself. Let's let I think it's difficult for any one person to think that they're smart enough to be able to take all this information and be like, yeah, I have the facts, I know the truth. Like, I think it's just ridiculous.
Mm,
However, we can take ourselves to a position of kind of what would be the most reasonable way to avoid further problems. Let's just give them their argument. Let's say that nothing is happening, the planet's fine, everything's okay. That doesn't answer the question. Okay, so should we still not be responsible for ourselves and our ecology? Right?
mhm,
Is that something that we shouldn't do? I think that if you were able to um, lower emissions overall, that's going to be net beneficial. Let's say that you can put enough solar panels on every house, enough to shut down coal and nuclear plants. Well, now you've just gotten rid of nuclear waste. You've gotten rid of any kind of emissions from coal running
mm,
plants. Like,
mm,
I mean, the argument that just because it's not happening doesn't mean that we shouldn't be responsible is an asinine statement to make. Just
mhm,
purely asinine. Just from the
mm.
premise alone.
Wow, cool. Stanley, welcome to the
What's up,
conversation. How
Stanley?
are you doing?
Hey Steve, how you doing? Hey Charles.
Tired.
I pretty much agree with Steve. There's some quibbles, but no reason to. I want to push back just slightly, Steve. Um, and this is just an esoteric argument. Um, we have to power something. So I think you said the word, Steve, responsible. Think about what you're doing. And that's my quibble.
Mm. Okay, so Stanley, my question to you would be, for those who think that, what's your take on the climate activists? I mean, there have been situations where they are very disruptive. They glue themselves to the road. They go to museums, and then they destroy things. They throw paint on artworks, and they just. Do you think that there's a problem with that method, or you think that that sort of disruptiveness is what is needed to call attention to a quote unquote looming problem?
Well, the reason they do stuff like that is to call attention. And, they may rightly or wrongly, and I would tend to think rightly, agree that they do what they think is necessary. And I want to bring up a quick point. Um, there's an urban forest in Atlanta, and I don't want to get into the politics of it. You can read about it. Just Google Cop City. And I would tend to be okay with, that sort of training facility. But this is an urban forest that has existed in the middle of Atlanta forever. And they want to cut down all the trees and, build a police and fire training facility. It's a forest and it has existed there forever. Um, I,
That
the
sounds like a horrible
only,
idea.
well, I think so too. Now, the thing is it's a, in the end, it's a property rights issue. Um, I can't remember whether it's the city, it's not privately owned, but the people who own that property, can do what they must with it. But it goes back to this responsibility thing. Is this the best thing we could do? Can we find somewhere else? This forest is next to like a rundown black neighborhood. And again, you know, this has existed in a big city. It's a green space. Why can't we do better? So anyway, I belabored the point, but this is my whole point about, some people there who are protesting have climbed trees, I imagine chained themselves to trees. people objected, but no one paid attention. So it was kind of a last ditch effort to climb a tree or chain yourself to it. People weren't
Mm.
paying attention.
Mm. So you don't think that these guys are stupid and careless or hyperbolic? They're doing this is what they think can, you know, get their voices heard to stop whatever is going to happen. This is what they are going to be able to do.
Well,
That's their message across.
um, hyperbolic, yes. But old people, are they going to be hyperbolic?
You were breaking up there a little bit, Charles. I didn't even hear what you said.
Yeah, so I was saying that does he think that like he just explained that they did that because it was absolutely necessary. That was the last resort they had
Well,
to
no,
be
I
able
didn't
to.
say it was absolutely necessary. I said no one was paying attention.
Oh, no one was paying attention. Okay, so that's my
So
that was
they
my
they
reading of it.
they stepped it up.
Yeah. So what else do you think that they could have done aside, such employing such antics?
Me, they
Yes.
could have just let it happen and gone on and be done with it. It's gonna happen. Oh well, I people do that all the time.
Mm. Steve, what
Is
about
it's
you?
letting something happen that you truly believe is detrimental on several levels. Is that okay?
I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay.
Okay. Well, we would tend to disagree.
Steve, what do you think?
What do I think about what specifically?
So, what do you think about, Stanley saying, no, I was talking about what do you think about the methods being employed by these activists, right? Do you think that's the best way to go about it, or is there a better way to
I think
go about?
I think honesty is kind of the rule of the day. I think that's where they need to really be. It's difficult for me because I'm not really truly an environmental advocate or activist, but I do care about my environment. But the thing that I don't like is when they blatantly lie or they use misleading evidence and they don't give you the whole story. And that's what I
Mm,
think is happening for the most part. I'm sure that they believe the things that they say, and I'm sure that they're good people until they become a terrorist organization. But you know, I think it's wise to have good conversations like this to try and kind of suss out what's going on and where we stand, where we believe, and what we can do. But I think again, I have to go back to my first statement. It's like if we would just not shit in our own kitchens and not shit in other people's kitchens, we'd probably be a lot better off. And what I mean by that
mm,
is being mindful and caring for our environment.
mm. Which is a very reasonable position and proposition. But the issue I have is that things like this, which obviously is, every side wants what's best for the earth, or at least I think they want it, right? But why can't they come together and say, okay, let's have a discussion? What is the best way forward, right? But as soon as one side brings up their argument, the other side reacts and it becomes politicized and it becomes, a war. It becomes, if you stand for this, I'm going to be against it, right? So the right thinks, or the quote and unquote climate deniers think that the other side, they're being hyperbolic, the evidence is not complete, right? And because of that, they feel nothing should be done at all, right? The other side
Yeah.
thinks that, oh, there's a problem, but then they're being hyperbolic, they're using evidence that may not match up just to get what they want. So both sides are not seeing eye to eye. Yet by the end of the day, if nothing gets done, it's humans that are going to bear the brunt. The environment is not going to discriminate and say, you know what, this person supported climate, and this person didn't support it. It just, I don't know. I guess my question is, why can't people work together? Why does everything have to be politicized?
Um,
I,
my answer is
I'm
going to be ideological possession with an
I,
inability
I'm
to compromise on simple concepts.
I'm
But that's
gonna
just me.
say I'm gonna say the environment does discriminate.
How?
Um, Disasters. I mean, now it's going to take a certain amount of belief, but in the U.S., well, you know what? I'm not going to even talk about worse hurricanes and flooding and all this stuff. Um, Steve, you're familiar with Superfund sites, and I think we've talked about this before. Um, there, Charles, there are places in the U.S. decades, like 50 years ago, where I'm thinking of a place in Northern Virginia where it was called Avtex, and they produced like synthetic fabric for the military or something like this. They effed up a huge portion of the Shenandoah River. Like, even today, there's certain parts of the Shenandoah River you can catch fish, but you can't keep them because they might be toxic. So that's how it. That's how the environment discriminates. You mess it up so bad, a poor person can't go fish and catch dinner.
Mm.
Yeah, I
That's
agree
Yeah.
with that.
that's discrimination, dude. And I lived in Northern Virginia. I lived 15 minutes away on a mountain coming down to the Shenandoah. It's just drop dead gorgeous. But when I went to get my fishing license, when I moved up there, you open up the book and it tells you where you can keep fish, where you can't keep fish. And you know what? I'll fish. I'm not going to keep any of it. That's discrimination. The environment can discriminate because you mess it up. It can't provide a bounty.
Mm. So I guess the sort of discrimination I was talking about is not a discrimination across class lines. It was more a discrimination across political lines, right? So you have poor people of every political, you know, iteration. You have rich people of every political persuasion, right? So if one side of the political spectrum thinks it's okay, right, it doesn't stop the poor people from that side being affected by it. That's the point I was
Well,
trying to get
neither
across.
Republicans nor Democrats can fish in that portion of the Shenandoah.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly, my
you know,
thoughts.
eating toxic fish is going to kill you regardless of political affiliation.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm being hyperbolic in my logic, of course, but, um, I just find we should do the best we can with our environment. I understand the economic arguments, etc., but we should do a little bit better. And devil may care for profit. Um, I find that so 1950s, 60s, and 70s. We know better now.
Yeah, Steve.
I don't have a disagreement with anything Stanley said.
Wow, that's good. So, well, I think um, uh, I think it's you both have made it clearer to me though, which is really not far from where I was coming from in the sense that we need responsible, um, we just need to be responsible for the environment at the least, right? At the least, we need to be responsible for the environment. But on the other hand, I think people should have less of a an emotional reaction to these things from either side. From those who deny it, they have the emotional reaction of saying, "Oh, the other side is just saying hyperbolic things. The evidence is not complete." Yeah, the evidence, but have you tried looking at the evidence yourself to see whether it makes any sense? See whether there is any claim to what the other side is saying, right? Have you tried doing that? And I think most people haven't done that, and that's a big problem, right? So when there's incomplete information and people are making decisions based off of incomplete information, I think it's very problematic, and it can lead us down a very, 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 very dark path.
But I want to push back on that a bit.
All right.
Um, Now, again, you know me, I'm very America centric, but you go to West Virginia, coal mining, timber stuff for the last 150 years or so, where coal mining, um, to get coal, they would literally blow tops off of mountains. And all the debris goes down into a river where dude, poor people, and not so much anymore, but back in the day, we're talking 100 or more years ago, where poor people could live up in the hills and the hollers, and they could hunt and fish. They didn't have to be rich to fish, or and I know I sound like I should whip out my banjo and sing folk tunes, but the bottom line is they have, and I literally live 35 miles from West Virginia. I have been there. They ruined natural resources for coal mining. And I'm not saying they should not coal mine. What I'm saying is they ruined people's lives. And in the end, in 2023, West Virginia is still one of the most poor states in the country.
Mm, interesting.
It's still, you know, it's beautiful naturally, but West Virginia isn't like swimming in riches. So in the end, what did all the coal mining and the resource extraction, how did it really benefit the people?
Yeah. And on top of that, I think there's this kind of misconception that a lot of these activists make is because they do make it political, is that I know tons and tons and tons of conservatives that are very ecologically minded. They don't want their natural resources screwed up. They want to be able to go fishing. They want to be able to go hunting. They understand why some herds need to be culled. They understand why we need to preserve these natural resources. And many of them don't drive gas guzzling vehicles, right? And a lot of them drive very fuel efficient vehicles. They're very mindful of their waste. Some of them have even tried to recycle, but we don't recycle here in Utah, which is unfortunate. And so, but there has been a lot of outcry, even from conservatives in conservative states, being like, "Hey, no, we need to be more responsible because we see what's going on. We can see that there's an entire island of garbage out in the Pacific Ocean. Like everybody knows this. It's not a fucking secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. So I think really the problem is that because there's such ideological possession, it makes it impossible for people to really have good good conversations where even reasonable compromises can be made, and maybe even further later on down the road. They want their cake right now, and they want to eat it right now rather than actually make baby steps towards advancement. And I think that's kind of where that problem is it's most of the time it just winds up that these people don't know how to talk to each other. Not to mention 80% of Americans haven't picked up a book in 20 years.
I'm gonna push back just a tad, but not
It's
much.
not going to happen. Yeah, go ahead, Stanley.
I think I agree with making it political, but why is it political? A lot. It's more economics. It's economics and politics are pretty much
I
hand
think
in hand.
I I think it's political because of the science of it all. It's like it's like when you look at the environment, it's like it's no different from like the human body. It's like it's so fragile. Like like um like with the trash. Let's take how Steve was saying they don't really recycle up there in Utah. Like those recycling programs are canceled in a lot of states just merely because. And can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
can. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Those recycling programs are canceled in a lot of states just because the city or wherever you at, they decide to cancel them because sometimes people in the inner city just don't recycle. Like they won't put their damn bins on the corner. They won't do it. And like it's crazy because like even when you think about I think those places are called incineraries where you could burn most of the trash, which is the in my opinion, that's the best way to get rid of it is to freaking burn it the fuck up. Get rid of it. Because if you don't get rid of it, if you put it in a landfill where they use like this solvent agent or something that they put like because all they do in the landfills is just pack that stuff down in holes and they try to put some type of toxic chemical on top of it for where it can break down because they just don't put it in the ground. Most times they try to get rid of it. Like they put a lot of that trash in very deep pocket holes in landfills instead of just. We're not talking about like third world country landfills where they just go and just throw this shit in piles. They actually try to, because our government tries to form some type of way of getting rid of this trash and garbage and taking care of it properly. But back to my point, it's just like it's the reason why it's so political because it's so scientific. Like the world is very fragile, and you imagine all of the carbon monoxide or dioxide that we're putting in the air, and it's just you would think that it would just evaporate. Like you would think that the trees would eat up a lot of it, because I thought that's how it works. The process is that the trees get hold of it, and then the trees can like recycle it back off into oxygen. But that's not happening. Like it's getting hotter. Like I don't know I don't know about other places, but we were at record highs this year, like in the 110s. Across the country, the nation, like yeah, it got hot this year. You know what I'm saying? It
Can
got
I ask you a question?
hot. Yeah.
You brought up trees taking care of carbon. Why do you think that is?
I don't know if I was correct or not, but I could have sworn I heard something
Well,
about
no,
the tree.
you are correct, and you brought up a great point. If all these trees can't handle the carbon, what does that pretty much lead to? Why do you think as many trees as we have can't handle all that carbon?
Probably don't
Man,
have as much trees as is
No,
needed to
we're
handle the
putting
carbon.
out too much carbon, is my point.
Mm.
So I'm going to agree with Stanley here, and this is why that whole joke about the trees and the math was kind of tongue in cheek. Is that mathematically we shouldn't have any excess CO2, but we still do. So something is amiss.
Mm.
And you also have to understand every tree isn't equal. and, and
Well,
all
and
the
that doesn't account for
carbon,
bushes, flowers, other plant life.
all the carbon we put out isn't straight C. Sometimes it's like it's been years since I've done chemistry, but every carbon atom isn't a straight carbon atom. There are a bunch of reasons why we put out too much carbon. We do some very complicated things with carbon. It's not always just straight carbon.
It's almost as if man is not part of the natural environment, because if you look at every other species, right, there is no way that the actions of, say, a lion, for example, or tiger, for example, is going to affect the environment in such a way that there is a phenomenal seismic shift, right? But somehow man, with his activities, right, and we are supposed to be a part of the natural environment. Somehow nature is supposed to be able to account for our activities, but it just seems like we've broken, a ceiling that we are now unnatural.
Well, I think it's the iPhones. Lions don't do iPhones.
And you know what? People throw shit like that away. Like if you imagine like the shit that people throw away, bro. Like I'm telling you, there's like needles and shit in there. There's like there's like this big old composition of the most non-biodegradable shit just mixed in with biodegradable shit. I, like something so serious as the environment. I don't see why we're not taking it serious. So like back to that political talk, like like I remember I had old family members that taught me how to use a compost pile. Like shit like that, like making sure that the soil, and I'm not trying to, use this tone. Let me tone it down a little bit, but just making sure that the soil and stuff like that is healthy for trees or around trees for grass or for farmland and stuff like that. The stuff is important. Like I know sometimes with people that are doing the work, they don't mean to like, okay, maybe we're digging a little bit too close over here for oil, or maybe we're, like I know that it's all about the hot spots that they can find. Like I feel like we're running out of hot spots too. That's another thing. And I hope that we're not, because it's just like, okay, we need some oil real bad, but we don't want to drill over here because we don't want this oil to, we don't want to hit nothing, and then this oil goes off into this water supply, like, but it might be some real good oil right here. And it's just like a lot of it. I feel like a reason why a lot of it becomes political is because people are complaining about if we have enough resources, and and then individual people and what they do, like I said before. So this is something that I've always cared about also too. It's just because they teach you stuff like this in school, and then when you become an adult and you become part of the political conversation and stuff, it's just like it's just like a normal thing that people worry about. It's just like, man, you want to make sure the environment is safe, man, and it's just like it's able to hold its weight for right now, and I think that's a good thing. But um, I tell people do simple things, man. Like if you got like a yard or something, water your grass. I don't know. I don't know.
No, you don't want to waste water on
Yeah, you
grass
don't want to even waste. I don't even know. Yeah.
that you can't eat. And I pretty much Steve is on point with this. Um, I honestly believe that we can have both. Maybe we won't have, all we want, but we will have all we need. And sometimes I think I know the way, capitalism works. And, eh, you know, just because you can produce it doesn't mean you have to produce it. There's a certain elegance to producing what you need.
Mm.
Um, you don't need the Bugatti, a
Oh,
Volkswagen will do.
but Andrew Tate needs it.
Yeah, and you know what? Talk about
All
X. Talk
and all
talk
the
about
alpha males.
talk about what we don't need.
Well, so I think we've had the okay. So Steve, I think we've had a very fruitful conversation. So maybe this would be a good place to draw the conversation to a close.
Yeah,
Steve,
I got to go take
you,
a shower.
yeah, yeah. So Steve, when are we doing that show on your channel? You haven't
Oh
started
yeah,
yet.
we need to do that soon.
Yeah.
Um, let me look at my calendar and I'll get back with you. Let's try and do it in the
But
next week to 2 weeks.
yeah, so within the next week and 2 weeks, I'm pretty much free any day of the week because I'm on leave, so I can pretty much do shows. So
Nice.
just hit
Okay.
me up when you're ready.
All right, we'll do.
So back to this conversation. What are your final thoughts on this?
I don't really have much final thoughts other than be open minded, be critical, but yet at least see some reason and do what you can to be responsible for your local environments. And I think uh, that would go an exceptionally long way. And try and
Yeah,
have open conversations with people without trying
yeah,
to demonize them.
yeah. Good. Thank you, Steve. Thank you,
Well,
Steve.
that
Unpopular.
is my siren song. So, um, I think visit your local Superfund site because almost every state has one. These are sites that were polluted decades ago and they're still not safe to be. They're still cleaning them up. So it's obvious that we can harm the environment. Maybe we've forgotten. We tend to forget a lot of stuff, um, which is an odd American trait. So I actually think that I don't understand why the environment is political. You may not believe in climate change or all this stuff, but Superfund sites exist. And I'm a fishing person. Being able to throw a line in a beautiful stream, but you can't because, or keep the fish because there are PCBs from 40 years ago because of Avtex or IBM or whoever was tossing waste in there or coal or whatever. That's not political, that's real. We don't have to wonder about whether man can hurt the environment. We have rivers to prove it.
Mm, that's cool. Unpopular. Final thoughts on this.
My final thoughts are just, if you want to know more about this subject or this topic, if you don't already, do more research. More research is always warranted and good to have more information. I remember one time I was so interested in what a landfill looked like. So I remember I walked in my local neighborhood because we have like the trash trucks would go in this backyard lane, and I walked all the way down there one time. I had to walk outside of my block, but I walked down there one time, and it's like a long trail to go all the way back there. And when I went back there, I seen a bunch of trucks look like they were just like swirling around doing donuts or some shit, and dust was just flying and rocks and stuff. I was like, "What's going on?" And I was kind of scared, and I didn't want to walk all the way back there, so I turned around and I seen the trash trucks come flying back out of there. But that's just a small little story. But yeah, if you want to know about this, just do more research, and I'm gonna do more research because I feel like there's a whole proponent of this that has to just deal with what is actually being done, how it's being done, and stuff like that. So that'll be my final statement. Yeah.
And find
Yeah, I think.
research that don't necessarily agree with. Don't just
Yeah,
go out there looking
Yeah,
for research
that too.
to justify your opinion. Yeah.
yeah.
Or pick up your local game and fishing DNR booklet. They'll tell you where you can't fish.
Mm,
Um, Pollution. If you can pollute a whole river, um, I think by just extrapolating, we can pollute other parts of the environment. I don't think you need research. Sometimes common sense is all you need.
hmm, that's interesting. Never thought I'd hear that coming from Stanley. But anyway,
You know what? Um, I always lead with common sense.
yeah, yeah, that's good. So thank you guys. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Unpopular, for this wonderful show. You guys have broadened my horizon on this, and I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys very, 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 very soon. Steve, please set that conversation as soon as possible
Hey,
so that we
one
can have
last
it.
thing. Did you ever do your thing with SKC? Talk about your book?
No, no, no.
Okay, well, let me know when you do.
All
I,
right,
I
definitely,
I'd love to listen.
definitely,
Absolutely.
definitely. All right, guys, that would be bye for now. Christina, Virginia, and every other person that came to the stream. Thanks, guys. Psyche Haka, and catch you in another live stream. It's bye for now.